Hey, somebody needs to find the bootstraps. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, the Professional Noticer is sponsored by Books for Veterans. The Veterans Administration in Washington, D.C. has asked for 10,000 Andy Andrews books. I'm personally donating as many as I can, but to reach 10,000, I need your help. What we are able to do to make that easier for you is for every $10 donation you make, a hardback book will be sent to the Veterans Administration for veterans, their families, and for the employees of the VA. That $10 will cover the cost of the book, the shipping, and handling. So whether you can make this a personal gift or a corporate donation, just go to andyandrews.com/veterans. This can be added to a website purchase or done as an individual entry. And thanks very much for your support. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on the Professional Noticer, and we love it when somebody comes to the table with both, and we have that today. This is going to be a little bit different for him. He's usually on the other side of the microphone. He is the host of the very popular podcast, Counsel Culture. Please welcome Eric Brooker. Hey, buddy.
Andy, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Listen, this is like the second time you've been on and the first time, because it's the first time in studio, but you're a returning guest.
I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be back. And mind you, for those watching, this is the coolest desk I've ever seen.
Well, thank you. We call this the Peace Table, and we had a lot of good conversations here.
Well, I expect this to be one.
Yeah, man. And so you're from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Grew up in Phoenix. I know a lot of people are going to say we did this backwards. We moved to St. Paul about 10 years ago.
Well, one of my best friends moved from Orange Beach to Duluth.
There you go.
It's like, good grief, what are you doing? So St. Paul, Minnesota, I kind of get what living there might be like because we are the St. Paul of this area. For years I would ask people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I'd say, are you from Dallas? And some people go, no, I'm from Fort Worth.
Yep.
And that's the way you guys are. You're just like, oh, so you're from Minneapolis? No, we're from St. Paul. And you know what? We have gotten that way here. People, because forever Gulf Shores was the deal and Orange Beach was unincorporated. And now Orange Beach has their own high school and, it's a big deal. And so, but people will say, so you live in Gulf Shores? And we're like, no, we live in Orange Beach. Yeah. So you are a leadership guru. I mean, you have gone from working in corporate America, which you're still a part of,
yep,
and now leading this Counsel Culture podcast, which has gotten huge. Tell me about that. Tell me the process.
Yeah, so it was really an interesting story. About a year and a half ago, had a friend of mine call me and say, hey, leadership and culture are really a passion for you. I'd like to have you on my podcast. And I said, I don't know what that looks like. He says, well, you've got a microphone, and if you have a computer, you can do this. So I went on his podcast. He walked me through the editing and all of that. And I thought, well, I could do that. And there was an author, a woman by the name of Deanne Turner, that had come on. I beg your pardon, I had read her book. And I had all sorts of questions about the book. And I thought, I'm going to start a podcast to get Deanne Turner, the VP of Talent from Chick-fil-A, on my show. And my passion is culture and leadership, so that'll be the focus of the show. And we've had everybody from the CEO of Chipotle to the founder of Reebok just came on the show. And it's been such a great journey to meet business leaders and mentors from all over the world and learn from them because, as I'm sure you have found, there's a lot of people out there that have experienced things that we're about to experience or that we're going through right now.
Right.
And they can walk us through their journey.
That's very neat. And it's also neat that Deanne was your first kind of connection because I know Deanne.
Oh, there you go.
And I remember having a conversation with Deanne one time where she teared up because the night before, her son had just been offered a scholarship to play football at the University of Georgia. And she told me how he came in and said, "Mama, I'm going to be a bulldog." She was like tearing up. So every time I think of Deanne, I think of her and her son with that. But so what is like in a time like this? I had somebody ask me the other day, we're in a time of uncertainty. And how do you deal with a time of uncertainty? And my immediate answer was, well, I deal with this time of uncertainty like I dealt with it before this time of uncertainty happened, because we have always lived in a time of uncertainty. We have never known what was going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
But there are probably some more specifics that you're dealing with than that flip answer that I gave. So how should people look at what's going on? I mean, we got the war in Ukraine, the coronavirus still happening, the people, the anti-masks and the mask and the anti-vax and the vax they're about to start a war here. I mean, it's like crazy.
I feel as if the last 2 to 3 years have been global uncertainty. The first thing that comes to mind is obviously coronavirus.
Right.
The next one, as someone that lives in Minnesota, is the George Floyd incident and the uncertainty that I went through, and some of the stuff that went on across the country in protest of what happened. Now it's Ukraine, now it's Russia. With some luck, and I think a lot of prayer, that ends. It just feels like something else is going to happen. So a couple things come to mind. First of all, having had a gentleman by the name of Monty Moran on my show. Monty was the CEO of Chipotle. We didn't talk much about his time at Chipotle so much as we talked about a PBS special that he has called Connected. And what he talks about at the end of his book and in this Connected series is that there's more that connects us than divides us. But meanwhile, anyone listening, anyone watching, we tend to walk into a room and point out, well, they're Republicans over there and they're Democrats. They're obviously non-maskers, so I'm going to go affiliate over here. I wonder if they got their vaccine. I'm going to go ask them if they got their vaccine. I'm only hanging out with people that are like-minded. But there's so much more that connects us than divides us. So for me, after reading the book and after talking to Monty, I think we need to focus on the things that connect us, the things that are really unifying. And candidly, one of them right now is what's going on in the Ukraine and what's going on in Russia.
Right.
But being able to talk about it in a meaningful way, because I think it's also reasonable to think that in fact, I think we're naive if we're not a little fearful of, could this come here? What would it look like if it came here? North Korea is throwing missiles in the air like there's no tomorrow. And I think there's some things to be concerned about, being able to address them and express our concerns as adults and even to our children, I think.
Yeah, I think there's probably a leadership vacuum in America. And I don't mean a vacuum of people who want to lead. I just think there's a vacuum of people who understand leadership, because the essence of leadership is influence, and the essence of influence is agreement, not disagreement. You don't follow somebody you disagree with. And so we have to find some things that we agree with so that we can talk. I would like to find the architect who built the first house without a front porch, because, man, when people retreated to their backyards with the privacy fences, now we spend a lot more time with people who are just like us.
Yeah. Well, and social media does that for us as well, right?
That's true. That's true.
If we're left, we go to one news outlet. If we're right, we go to another news outlet. We find our affinity on social media and we align ourselves. And now they've got algorithms that tell us, well, wait, you liked this. Here's 30 other things. So the other thing that I think we need to do, put your phone down and start listening. The interactions that we can have.
I agree.
When I'm sitting across the table with someone that I don't agree with, that can walk me through the why. My dad said this many, many years ago. Eric, I don't need to walk away agreeing with you. I want to walk away understanding you. And I think that's one thing that we lack as a society right now. Everybody wants to be a leader. Everybody knows the right way to get it done, but no one's listening to other people. And I think we could solve a lot of the world's problems simply by shutting up and listening.
I agree. There's, I think there's at least one generation that has grown up without the benefit of learning the art of conversation from their parents.
Yeah.
I know that when I grew up, we wanted to be adults, and so our parents would tell us, "You can stay in the room as long as you're quiet. But if you call attention to yourself, you're going to bed." And so we would sit there and we would listen to the adults talk. And sometimes we would think, they've forgotten we're here. They're talking about things we've never heard them talk about. But we would hear them talk to people that we knew they disagreed with and that we knew they weren't on the same. And we heard that. But I think today there's a lot of, okay, I'm putting the kids in the playroom and you kids watch this movie. And if you come out, you're going to bed.
Yep.
And so there's not a lot of learning that. How do you change that?
Well, I think it comes back to, we learned this from a gentleman, a foreign exchange student, Mohammed, that lived with us many, many years ago. My wife and I were married maybe 10 years. Mohammed came to live with us as sort of a last minute, there's some exchange students that need a place. Do we know anybody that has a place? Our name got volunteered, and we thought, what a good experience. Mohammed never left our side. We had friends over. His English was okay. He came from the UAE, but anytime we had anybody over, he was sitting in the same room. He wouldn't talk. He listened. And what fascinated me upon his departure I want to say he lived with us for about 6 months. He was kind enough to get each one of our children a going away gift. And he got something for my wife and I. But he didn't just get something. He got something based on everything he learned over the last 6 months. And it's because he sat there and he listened. He heard the things that were important to us. So I'll take it back to doing the same thing that you talked about. When we were all kids, we sat in the room with our parents because we wanted to be adults. I think the kids of today, I'm thinking specifically of my 12, 13, and 15-year-old, they want to be in the room, but we shoo them away. We give them cell phones, and we say, go play on these devices. Here's an iPad. Go away. We put them in front of a TV, and we threaten them with things like bedtime or we'll send you outside. They want to be in the room. They want to listen, but I think we've got to give them that opportunity.
I think we do, and I think there's something to be said for adults being adults, because there's some Rubicon that we crossed a number of years ago, because for a long time the kids, their greatest wish was to grow up, is to be an adult, to be they wanted to dress that way, they wanted to. But now I see a lot of adults that want to be kids.
Yeah.
They dress like kids, they act like kids, they talk like kids, and even their own kids are embarrassed.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know. It's just something I've noticed, and it's something I think is a drag on society. It doesn't move us forward, that kind of thinking.
Well, I think one of the challenges, and I don't want to bring it back to technology, but you and I've been sitting together throughout the course of the entire day, and I'm grateful for the time, but we've set aside the things like iPads and technology and cell phones.
Right.
I'm fascinated. I, like everybody listening, generally has a phone in my hand, but I found recently when I put my phone down, there's there's this really cool thing going on around me. There's people. There's people at the airport. There's people on the metro. There's people on the bus. There's actually people at my church. I don't know if you know this, but I go to church and there's people there.
Right.
But we're so focused on the next thing and knowing we want to be able to engage in the conversation. Well, the way in which to engage in the conversation by today's standards is to know what's going on via social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, CNN, Fox News, all the things. But I'm not taking time to learn from others. And I think back to the kid thing for just a moment, putting them in the room, but not losing sight. You mentioned that there were times when you were a kid where your parents forgot that you were in the room. I do a far worse job than my wife. My wife is really mindful of the kids being there. And in doing that, we'll pause with the adults for a minute and we'll talk to the kids about what it is that we're talking about and why it matters. In a lot of the conversations right now, it's Ukraine and Russia.
That's good, man. That's good.
My wife does it far better than I do. But being mindful of the fact that these are things we talk about at the water cooler or by today's standards on Zoom sessions with coworkers. These are the things our kids are talking about at school. It just is. So we have to be able to frame some of these things up in ways in which we can educate our kids.
Right.
Because today at school, all across America, someone is telling your child about the ballistic missile that North Korea shot last night, or the nuclear threat that Russia has made mention that they're very willing to do if needed. We've got to take the time to talk to our kids about this stuff and ease them into, yes, as someone told me on my podcast the other day, let's look at a map. Let's talk about where Russia is and just how far away it is. But we don't take the time because we're so focused on the next thing.
Right. You know, there is an awareness, I think, and I tease Matt and Little M about their generations, and we go back and forth about, you didn't know that, you don't know them, you hadn't seen that show, and yet I'm becoming more aware of of what some people think of as normal, that is just because of what they have experienced. You told me a story earlier about your youngest child and the masks.
Yeah.
That hit me. That just blew me away. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, so we were walking into Target about a year ago. Our son had just had his 5th birthday. The mask mandate at the time was you don't have to wear a mask until you're 5. And we were at a point in the pandemic, feel free to judge, we were at a point in the pandemic where masks felt a little optional. And I looked at my son as we got out of the car and I said, Ross, would you like to put a mask on? We're walking into Target. You're 5 now, so they really want you to wear a mask. And he looks at me. Mind you, our oldest son, who's now 15, was 14 at the time, Owen. Ross looks at me and says, Dad, do you have any of Owen's masks? And I looked at him very confused, and I looked at my wife very confused. I said, Ross, Owen's masks are not going to fit you. And he looks at me, and this is the gut punch. He looks at me and says, Dad, do you have any of Owen's masks from when he was 5? And it dawned on me right then and there, this is normal. This is all.
It's all he knows.
This is all he knows.
Wow. It makes me think of a conversation that we had in the office the other day about culture and about cultural literacy. And as you know, I used to work as a comedian. And so for some reason, people think that comedians are good for children. It's always been, it's kind of a joke among comedians. I mean, do people ask you to do stuff for their kids? Oh yeah. And no comedian wants to do something for kids, because if they haven't experienced it, it's not funny.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like the first time I ever did anything in Canada, I was halfway through an Abraham Lincoln bit, and I happened to think, oh my gosh, he wasn't their president.
Yeah.
I wonder if they know who he is. And so there is a here and now, a present that we have to kind of bring each other into, no matter the generation. And so that is a form of leadership. It's a form of leadership that a lot of parents have left on the table.
Leadership, I'll speak for myself, but I don't think we as a society look for leadership opportunities. We have a lot of complaints, we have a lot of gripes, we have a lot of wishes and hopes for our country, for our family, for our neighborhood, for our city and towns. But leadership starts when your 15-year-old, I'm speaking to myself, when your 15-year-old's driving with his permit and you're paying attention. Moreover, it turns when your 15-year-old sitting in the passenger seat and you grab your cell phone while you're driving and you start texting somebody, which I've done, but it's these moments of leadership. They're very small. You talk about in a number of your books how much you as an individual matter, you the listener, you the person reading, and how everything that we do matters. But those are all leadership moments. Me putting my phone down and being present. I know you can yell at me after the show. I know texting and driving is maybe the single dumbest thing we all do, but we do it. But that is an example of leadership to my son,
Sure,
who will, God willing, not get in an accident and say, "Well, Dad, I learned that from you." Like,
right.
I learned to text and drive or pull up the map while I'm driving. These are these little moments throughout the day where we can be leaders to those around us, and I think many of us miss them.
I agree. You know, being the host of a very popular podcast like you are, I have some idea of what you do. You know, having guests on this podcast, and I'm often fascinated with what I walk away from. You know, with what I walk away with, and you know, you'll have somebody on and they have something particular that they would like to promote, or something that they, you know, feel passionate about, and so, you know, you kind of go into it going, okay, we're going to do this, and then somebody will drop something in there, and you're sitting there and you're going, man, I'd like to stop and write this down right now.
Yeah.
What have been a couple of those moments for you that where you weren't expecting something and you just got hit with some truth or some wisdom that floored you?
Well, there's a lot of them. And I think to your point, I've been blessed and fortunate to have, again, so many incredible business leaders and just leaders in general on the show. The common theme that surprises me about the ones that say yes and come on the show, and even the ones that say no, these people genuinely care. These are the folks that we aspire to be that genuinely care. The founder of Reebok, and I don't mean this in a boastful way to me, I think he got off the show and feels like he learned something from me. I have no clue what I taught him, but he was present to the conversation. Right. He asked me questions before and after. We got to know one another. I was a person. In that hour and a half long that we recorded, I mattered to him. In everything leading up, I mattered to him. After the fact, he sent me a thank you gift because he enjoyed the conversation. Monty Moran, the CEO of Chipotle. We had the CEO of the Ronald McDonald House Charities. These people genuinely care. And it's almost different than other interactions I have with the barista or the person bagging groceries or anything like that. I believe they are where they are because of who they are as individuals. The other thing that I've learned that I think has been really inspiring to me is this idea. One of my guests was a gentleman named Ryan Leake. Ryan wrote a book called Chasing Failure. Google it, watch the documentary on YouTube. He tried out for the NBA. He tried out for the NBA knowing he was going to fail. But he did that so he could learn the lessons of failing. And so all the people we aspire to be, whoever it is, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Michael Jordan, they've all failed. We look at what they are today. In fact, I'm sure you have a myriad of stories. In fact, I know you've got 51 letters.
Yeah, 51 letters of rejection from my best-selling book.
But we all aspire to be what Andy Andrews is today or what Bill Gates is today. But we don't become that because either we fail and say, well, that's not for me, or we're not willing to take the risk for fear of failure. And I'm fascinated. So many of my guests have fallen flat on their feet time and time and time again, but they pick themselves up and they do it again, and they'll file bankruptcy and they'll do it again. Their willingness to say, there's a better way to do this, or I believe I'm the person to write this, or I believe I'm the person to create this, and their willingness to fail and then pick themselves up is probably the most inspiring for me of all the conversations. That is a very common theme.
One last question. If you could wave a magic wand and make something happen with your podcast that you could have that one person as your guest, and knowing it would be your last show, the show that you would be remembered by, who would you like to talk to?
Wow. So I ask a question at the end of every podcast, which I think is the hardest question. So your listeners will have to grab one of the recent ones. And I ask, if you do a lot of media, what's the one question that you wish people would ask you? My one last guest, who would it be? I'm fascinated. I'd have two because I can. One is my wife. I think the level of support that she has been through all my trials and errors, the podcast journey, me writing a book, all these things that I do, and the support that she's been, I'd love to get her unadulterated version of the sacrifices that she makes. I recognize that she makes sacrifices each day for me, but I'd love to get the complete unbiased version. And then if I had someone else, it would be Brené Brown. Not because of her notoriety and all of that. I'm really genuinely fascinated with her work, particularly her work on shame. And I'd love to just have an open dialogue, whether it went on the air or not. I'd love to just have that conversation with her and walk through her journey to where she is today.
I think both of those are going to happen.
I'm going to turn the table. I'm going to ask you. I know I'm not allowed to do this, but I host my own, so I have to ask. You get one last show. Who is it and why?
When I sit at this table, there was a conversation that I had visualized for a long time as the studio was being built, and now I know that will not happen because the guy passed away. But it was Winston Groom who wrote Forrest Gump, who if you've only seen the movie, you're only 10% there. The book is a work of genius. It's just genius. And I had always thought I would love to get Winston and Jimmy Yeary and Anthony Crawford. Jimmy and Anthony are both songwriters. And Michael Perry, who is an author up in Wisconsin. And totally different kinds of writing, but I always wanted to get them around a table and hear Winston Groom and Jimmy Yeary. I mean, Jimmy wrote "I Drive Your Truck," the CMA Song of the Year, and Anthony's written for so many singers, and then Michael is a New York Times bestseller, Population 485, and I love that communication thing. And so since Winston is gone, there is an author that I read his stuff, but I've never met him, never gotten close to him, and his name is Bernard Cornwell, and I read his books to learn how to tell a story. And he writes historical fiction is what he does. And I think I would really, really like to talk to him. And I'm kind of the same way that you are with Brene Brown. It wouldn't even have to be recorded. I just
want to have the conversation.
Yeah, I just want to have a conversation with him.
You know, I know we're wrapping up the show. One of the things that your question made me think of, and a good buddy of mine, Lucas, does a better job of this than anybody I know. We all aspire, especially in the world that you and I are in, to have conversations with folks. Lucas does an incredible job. If you're the single most important conversation you're having in the entire day is the one you're having right now.
Right now.
That's it. Focus on this one. And we do this in Zoom meetings. We do this at work. We got to get to the next meeting. Lucas does this extraordinary job of he'll be late to every meeting. I love you, Lucas, if you're listening. He'll be late to every meeting because the most important meeting he's in is the one he's in right now. He's paying attention. He's thoughtful. He wants to give them the time that they deserve. And so, again, you asked an incredible question. You definitely got my mind thinking. But I think we can all do a better job of being present in the moment.
I agree. Thank you, buddy, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, everybody, please remember Counsel Culture. We'll have the links to how to get in touch with you, how to follow you, and they'll be in the show notes. And so thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Dental floss for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by DiscountDentist.com. Friend, has your lower jaw been aching for weeks? Do you have a front tooth that's darkening or loose? Why haven't you gone to the dentist? No dental insurance, you say? Well, now there's help. Allow DiscountDentist.com to save the day. DiscountDentist.com performs extractions, root canals, and all kinds of oral surgery at rock-bottom prices. DiscountDentist.com is staffed by former veterinary assistants with years of experience of operating on a budget. Want to be anesthetized but don't want to pay for Novocaine or nitrous oxide? No problem. All Discount Dentist locations are BYOB. In fact, if you show up early for your appointment, our dentist will have a few drinks with you. And after your surgical session, our friendly staff will drive you to your free consultation with our business partners, DiscountDentures.com. So come in today, Discount Dentist and DiscountDentures.com. It'll only hurt when you sober up.